about 20%. The current average is about 18.4 in the state of Utah, but here in Cache Valley, we're at 10.9%. So I brought a handout to share with you all so that you can see how we compare across the state, and it's illustrated and color-coded. You can see how we rate in terms of the population, Latino population, and then you have absolute numbers and percentages. So just leave this for you to all take a handout. So talking back to that experience, you know, when I think about Hispanic Heritage Month, it's a time of celebration of human capital. Before the Mayflower in the 1700s, we had Santa Fe, and we had explorers that arrived in the Florida coast in the 1500s. You know that there's many places, even in Utah, like Escalante, with Spanish names. So the first European language spoken in the U.S. after the native languages was Spanish. So there's a really long, long legacy of contributions to the economy, contributions to the history of the U.S., and as we look back to the present, you know, I shared with you some of the statistics in terms of the demographics of the state. Recognizing these contributions is important because this is a population that is here to stay. Currently, about almost 70% of the population, the Latino population in the state, are U.S. born. And on average, at least in Utah, we have a very young population. The median age is about 25.4%. So we're talking of a young population that is just here to stay, and they're coming here, at least for northern Utah in this area. They're recent immigrants, but there's folks like me where my family came from in the 1700s to the New Spain before the Treaty of Guadalupe, and it all became the U.S. So in my family, we've gone from the New Spain to Mexico to the U.S., and I was born in South Texas. So there's a rich legacy of the Latino population in Utah. So it is my invitation today to think about that future and that human capital that we have here locally. The Logan School District alone has about 30% Latino students in the high school. And we think about them as being in the next decade, that are going to be sustaining our economies. You know, they'll be contributing in the arts and entrepreneurship. We just finished a series of classes that was taught here in the county with Extension. I worked for Extension on entrepreneurship. We had people that are coming here, and we taught these classes in Spanish because these people want to contribute to the economy and create employment and opportunities for people like themselves and others. So with these thoughts, you know, let me see if I forgot anything else that I'd like to say. Just that invitation that as we think of Hispanic heritage, that we think of this population that's been here for hundreds of years, and we're all at different stages. There's people that are multi-generational, and there's people that are recent arrivals. And as part of the celebration at Utah State University, we have an event called Celebrating Our Roots happening this coming Saturday on campus. I'm going to leave this poster for you all to take a look. And if you are able to, we'd love to have you come. It'll be a celebration of culture, food, and music. And we have a special guest. Our own Ernesto Lopez will be performing as one of our special talents in the community. Thank you so much for your time.
Special talent we don't know about.
He plays the guitar and sings
amazingly so. So if you're curious and want to hear him, please come. We'll leave this poster too.
Awesome. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
What do you do? Sing?
Thank you so much. That means he'll be a good chair. Thank you, Selena, very much.
Thank you, Selena.
You could just stand up, you know.
Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So now you have to share your talent out loud.
I did last Christmas.
You did last Christmas.
Yeah, what do we call that?
The Christmas parade.
The Christmas parade.
I didn't go to the Christmas parade, so I didn't know. Okay, well,
Maybe we'll have to request something for an opening ceremony for
Oh, my
the holidays or
goodness.
something.
there we go.
Little musical interlude.
So, all right, on to our regular agenda. It's time to accept the minutes and approve the agenda for this evening.
I'll move acceptance of the minutes and of tonight's agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I heard both of them at the same time, so
Either is
you get to
fine.
pick. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Our 2022 regular meeting schedule is the first and third Tuesdays at 5:30. Our next meeting is the 1st of November. We'll have 2 meetings in November and only 1 in December. So we'll only have the first Tuesday in December. So if you were planning on coming later, hold off till January. It'll be more exciting then. Now is the time when we take questions and comments for the mayor and the council on items that are not otherwise on the agenda. If anyone cares to speak, please come to the microphone, state your name, and please take 3 minutes or less. Going once, going twice. We'll move on. Mayor, do you have anything to share with us tonight?
I do not. That's an unusual day, I know, but,
Wow.
oh, actually, well, did we get the letters down?
The letter's right here.
Oh, perfect.
I have the letter right here.
Okay, that we did receive our check from the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation for their $250,000 last dollar grant for the plaza. That had been pledged. We knew it was coming, and so I just thought it would, and I thanked them because, you know, it's been committed for some time, but I thought it would be nice for you to sign a thank you letter to them as well as just me, so they hear from all of us. So if you'll sign that, we'll get that in email, and again, we appreciate their support of that.
Absolutely. It's wonderful. We do appreciate the fact that there are generous people and organizations out there that are willing to support something as wonderful as a new library in a community.
And this one was actually for the plaza.
For the plaza.
But we have had some wonderful donors for the library as well.
Okay, well, community spaces, let's put it that way.
Yes, that's a perfect way to do it.
Okay, we'll move now to council business, and I'll take the first 2 items, and then I'm going to turn 4th North Corridor over to Amy, even though it says me, because you're the one who asked for it.
Okay.
I think I know what you want to talk about, but I didn't want to presume. Planning Commission was short. They talked about the affordable housing plan. They did a workshop on that at the end of the evening. We will be amending our affordable housing plan in the next few weeks. So if you are interested in participating in that, please attend a Planning Commission meeting. I'm sure they will have a public hearing regarding it. All of it is online. Russ did a long and involved presentation regarding the current plan and the potential for our future plan. And in addition to that, a conditional use permit was issued for Logan's first warming center for the winter. So there will be a warming center operating at least part-time at St. John's Episcopal Church. I understand they also will be doing one in North Logan, but I don't know what their schedule will be. So,
It hasn't yet been decided.
huh?
It hasn't yet been decided.
Right. So I had heard today that second half, so. Amy asked, because I waxed poetic, or not poetic, about water school. About a month ago, I was asked, well, it was a little more than a month ago, I was asked if I would attend water school, and I didn't know what it was. So I kind of didn't answer. And then the head of the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, who I know because I'm on the Cache Water District Board as well, called and said, you need to come. We need to have you there. I said, okay. So I drove down to Cedar City, and they were at Bryan Head, and we arrived on Thursday afternoon and had dinner as a group, and then we spent all day Friday and half of Saturday talking about the future of water in the state of Utah. It was both exhausting and fascinating, depressing, and heartwarming all at the same time. So I thought I would talk about a few of the presentations, and I would end with one that I thought was particularly challenging for all of us to accomplish. There were about 20 of us. There were a few people from the governor's office. There were the directors of all of the four major water conservancy districts in the state. And if you don't know, that's Weber Basin, Jordan Valley, Utah Valley, and Washington County. So those are the largest ones in the state. Utah Valley is by far the largest geographically. And Weber Basin operates probably the most federally funded dams in the state and reservoirs. So one of the presentations was about the Colorado River, and we've heard a lot about the Colorado River in the last little while. We've talked about Lake Mead, we've talked about Lake Powell. It's been scarier and scarier and scarier all summer long because of the water levels dropping precipitously. Well, they aren't dropping precipitously, they've been dropping for a long time. It just became very, very apparent this year. As you might know, the Colorado River is divided into an upper basin, a lower basin, and then there's part of the water flow is dedicated to Mexico. The upper basin is Utah, Colorado, a piece of Wyoming, and a piece of New Mexico. The lower basin is Arizona and California, mostly the Imperial Valley and Nevada. The lower basin has a different sort of allocation of the flow of the Colorado River than the upper basin does, which is why you'll hear on the news all kinds of discussions about Utah wanting their share of the Colorado River flow and feeling that they're not getting their share. The challenge is going to be going forward, that share is smaller and smaller. So do you already have it? Do you not have it? Forever and ever since the Colorado River Compact was created, the Imperial Valley has taken every single drop of water that was allocated to it. And Nevada was very, very small. Their allocation was only 330,000 acre feet a year. That's all they got, which will come into play in a minute. So the Colorado River, what I came away with is April influences runoff efficiency. So you always look at April and figure out if it's hot, if it's cold, if it's wet, if it's dry. That's going to impact how the runoff comes off the mountains, and then, if we have enough snowpack. Fall and spring temperatures influence the dryness of the high mountain ground, which also influences runoff efficiency. So you have to watch the weather, gives you a grand idea of how it might work out. The inflow into Lake Powell of the water coming out of the mountains was 4 times more in 1983 and 1984 than it was in 2021 and 2022. So there was 4 times more water going into that reservoir both years in 83 and 84. So it just gives you an idea of how little it can be. We're down here on the graph. It's like this big instead of this big. So we also had a presentation on the Great Salt Lake, which is another thing everyone hears about. And we're talking about it a lot. We're talking about the Great Salt Lake drying up. Tage Flint, who's a friend of mine who used to be the director of the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, did the presentation. He showed some very interesting pictures of his family's house when he was a kid, because they lived by the Great Salt Lake. And there was this little pinpoint dot. And then there was the lake. There was a little bit of open space, and there was the lake. He said, yeah, we used to play in it. My grandmother lost some cows. They walked over to Antelope Island one year, and took us all summer to find them. And
Never get them back.
he was And now you look at the picture of where his house was, there's probably 1,000 houses that have been built because the lake has receded and they're using that ground. So you look at this one picture and it's just so graphically amazing how much growth we've had and how much, and you combine that with the lake receding a little bit and you've got just all these houses that are now sitting where he used to play in the marsh, basically, is what he said. But he talked about policy views and how the policies in the state of Utah have governed the Great Salt Lake over time. He talked about the policy views from 1850 to 2000. So that's a long 150 years. The highest priority right was held by agriculture. That was a policy view. First federal projects funded in the state of Utah were funded for agriculture. But they always thought ag returns water to the system. In other words, you water your field, it comes back into the system, ends up in the Great Salt Lake. Because the Great Salt Lake is the end point for the Bear River, the Weber River, and the Jordan River. And so as long as farmers were using most of it, there was still plenty in the river to go down to the Great Salt Lake. And then we decided we needed water conservation. Well, most of the conserved water we started conserving was used to fund growth. So we didn't not use it. We conserved it from other uses, but we grew and used it for what they call M&I, municipal and industrial, our drinking water. And so as ag was converted from agricultural uses to houses, less water was returned to the Great Salt Lake. So the lake started to diminish. The new policy views focus on let's make better snow. So we do a lot of cloud seeding. In reality, the fact that the lake is there helps fuel the snow that ends up in the mountains that fuels the ski industry. So it's kind of, we're in a unique ecosystem in that regard. They want to prevent dust. We've all determined the dust could be very dangerous. They want to protect migratory birds. For the first 150 years, they didn't talk about them. They want to protect the ecosystem of the lake. They never talked about that before either. And then they talked about the causeway. The causeway was built, and it bisected the Great Salt Lake into two pieces, or the railroad tracks causeway. They put a hole in the middle of it so the water could flow back and forth. And Tage showed a picture of a boat going through that when he was a kid. And now it was an arch, and the boat could go through with people in it. Now you can see this much of the arch, and no water can go through. So they either have to decide, so that half the lake is much saltier than the other part because it can't move freely between the two parts. They also talked about the mineral industry, because the mineral industry has water rights. Do they get to take those water rights even when the lake is diminishing? Do they get the same water rights? That's a conversation that people are having now. We also use the words ag optimization a lot, but we need a real definition of what that means. Is ag optimization doing more with less? Is it doing more, is it doing way more with the same? What does it really mean? So we need a good definition for that. We need to change our view of our landscapes because we do live in a high desert. We need higher density, and they are very much in favor of secondary meters. House Bill 410 was passed last legislative session, and it gave $4 million to retain and enhance the flows to the Great Salt Lake. Improve water quality, conserve and restore upstream habitats, integrate water quality and water management plans, and the Nature Conservancy and the Audubon were chosen to manage this money. They're still in negotiations on how that will be spent and what will be accomplished with that $40 million. There have also been some really big ideas about the Great Salt Lake. Importing water from the Pacific Ocean, importing water from some large interstate river, or changing the Bear River Development Act. And if they change the Bear River Development Act, that will directly affect Cache County and Box Elder County. Because at the present time, we have a right to 50,000 acre feet, 60,000 acre feet, in the Bear River, as does Box Elder County. Weber Basin and Jordan Valley have a smaller allocation. Theirs is 30,000 each. They have the population growth, so they would love to be able to reallocate that water down the hill, so to speak. So, and all these were very, very frank conversations. It was not a, we're telling you this because, this is how we want it to spin. They were trying to be very honest about what's going on. Probably the most interesting person that spoke was the head of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, which covers Laughlin, Boulder City, Henderson, Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, Clark County Reclamation District, and the Las Vegas Valley Water District. Las Vegas, remember, they got 330,000 acre feet of water from the Colorado River. They are 90% reliant on that water. They only own 10% of the water outside of that Colorado River flow. So Vegas is like a microcosm of what needs to happen, what might have to happen, how bad it can get, in a way. So their drought response, let's see, there have only been 2 years since the year 2000 when the Colorado River has exceeded its normal flow. And those 2 years were in 2005 and 2008. So they don't correlate to how much, when the highest flow into the reservoir was, but that was the highest flow in the last 20 years. Most of it has been far below that normal water flow. So the drought response by Southern Nevada is, of course, to reduce demand and create stringent water conservation measures. They've also been negotiating with the Colorado River to see if they can get some more water. They're trying to secure alternate supplies, and I think the man said, we're going to take every drop out of the Virgin River we possibly can. Wow. So, and Southern Utah, the Washington County said, well, you're not going to get any because we're going to take it first, kind of thing. It's sort of that. It's done in good-natured conversation, but it's very, very serious. They're going to address their infrastructure needs. Wherever there's a leak, that's water that's lost. So they want to make sure that they have solid infrastructure that is making the most of the little water they have. They have landscape codes that they've passed. There's no turf in front yards, and you may only have 50% of your backyard in turf. You can have no turf in commercial or industrial, no turf on streetscapes, and golf courses are on water budgets, and they have surcharges if they overwater. But the largest sector of participants in the Water Smart Landscaping Program are the golf courses in the Las Vegas area. They said they have removed enough turf in this area to circle the globe at the equator. So just to give you an idea. They have mandatory watering schedules. They have water bills that incentivize conservation. They have graphs with your use. They have 4 rate tiers because they have to use every tool in their toolbox to try and get people to conserve water. And the highest rate tier pays more than $5 per 1,000 gallons of water, which is pretty darn high, right, Paul?
What do we pay?
What do we pay for the highest tier? 2 something? And is it per 1,000?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're about at 50% or less of that that figure. In 10 years, in that area, in Nevada, consumptive use has declined by 36 billion gallons, while adding 400,000 residents. So whatever they're doing is working. They talked about the intakes to Lake Mead. They put a lower intake in Lake Mead to get it out of almost the bottom of Lake Mead. And they had planned on doing this before this year. And this year, their top 2 pulls from Lake Mead, the first one is all the way out of the water, and the second one is within a foot of being out of the water. So if they hadn't put that in, they would have no ability to pull water out of Lake Mead. Their new conservation goal is 86 gallons per capita per day. No non-functional turf. They want turf only allowed at schools, parks, and cemeteries. And they're putting a moratorium on cooling towers and water-cooled HVAC systems, which they say consume an immense amount of water. The director said he might not live through it, but his next target is pools. He wants pools to only be a limited size. And high consumptive water users, like the bottled water industry. Those are his next two targets to help reduce water use. And then the last one I wanted to talk to before the game was Utah's water challenge. Water use is not all reported using a national standard. So not all cities and states include all water use, but Utah has always historically included all potable, secondary, and reuse by all users. Most places do not count reuse at all. Some places don't count any secondary water at all. We try and count all of it. So our water use looks like more than twice what other people use per capita. And we get made fun of about it on national television sometimes. So they're trying to reconcile that. That's one of those challenges that they're trying to figure out. How do we talk about water conservation when everybody says, well, you use so much, you certainly can be able to conserve. But if we're counting more different water user types in our totals than other states, it's hard for us to have a conservation goal that's realistic for the individual homeowner. And we've been the recipient of many federally funded water projects, most of which are paid back to the government over a 40-year period. They set up a system to do that in the very beginning. 1902 was Strawberry Valley. 1904, the Uinta Indian Irrigation Project. 1922 was Moon Lake. 1933, Weber Basin Project. 1938, Provo River. 1956, Colorado River Storage Project, Central Utah Project, and the Emery County Project. In 1992, the Central Utah Project Completion Project. It was too expensive to do it all at once, so we had to sort of split it up a little bit. And what are we considering? Especially Washington County is considering statewide grass removal. We're talking about that. Excess water use surcharges and commercial restrictions with respect to turf, with respect to hot water reuse, meters, the whole, whatever we need to do. Because there were a couple of water districts this year that were close to not being able to provide all the water to people that they had expected. I'm going to say expected because water users will often say, I have a right to this water. Well, they do, but when there isn't any water, I don't know how your right holds. And they have to, they prioritize the systems. Weber Basin owns all the water in the Weber Basin system. So they pipe it all the secondary water, all the culinary water. They pipe it all to the various users. They monitor it. They've got meters on all of it. It's probably one of the most efficient systems in the state of Utah, if not in the region. And one thing that we did, we divided up into groups, and we were all given glasses of water, and it had a certain amount of water, and it said how many gallons, or how many, you know, it was like 7 or 10 or 20 or whatever. And there was a new developer that was coming into town, and there was the new developer, and he had an empty glass. This is all the water we had. So he needed this much water, so who's going to give up their water? So we had to sit around and negotiate who was going to give up some water and who could live with just the least amount. One was parks, one was, you know, my own house, one was the business down the street. And it was very interesting because it was like, you know, who gets the water? Well, I'm here. I want to build this great development for you. And you know, the person who was doing that had to sell it to the other 4 people in the group. And can you give me your water? And how much water can you give me? I need this much water. But of course, collectively, we didn't have enough water for everybody. So you have to, the game was to figure out how you would divide it up and how you would share it. And we were, you know, one person was like the mayor, and one person was the city council. And the city council had to say, nope, you don't get any more water. And so it sort of emphasized for everybody in the group what a difficult challenge it can be to work with a limited resource. And ultimately, water is the delimiting factor, especially in the state. It's going to limit, it is the delimiting factor. And so, anyway, that's my report. Any questions?
Excellent. You talked about the allocation, for example, San Joaquin or valleys. So when the Colorado River goes down, does everybody's allocation go down proportionately?
Yes and no.
Oh, okay.
In theory, yes, but it probably depends upon who lets the water out when, out of the reservoirs.
So a little trickery going on?
Well, it's, you know, there's an old saying called first in right, first in might, right? And there are some on that river basin that are first in right and first in might. So it just depends on how it, you know, there are lots of conversations that go on all the time to try and get it to be transparent and be fair.
Another question is, we referred to the Great Salt Lake. As it gets lower and lower, that will produce more dust, which is toxic. And at what point how close are we to having that where it's actually a health hazard from the deposits in the lake?
Depends upon the time of year and depends upon how low you want it to go before you decide it's a crisis.
So it's getting close.
It's lower than it has been in recorded history, in our recorded history. But we still have mineral industries who are taking water out. And so it's really complicated, really complicated.
Well, and I understand from meteorological data
Yes.
is that we are heading into a 20-year drought. Is that at least 20 years? We're going to keep going down, down, down.
Well, we're in the middle of a 20-year drought.
Yeah.
So we need to pay attention.
Start praying for rain again.
That probably is not the most effective solution.
On your faith.
It is a solution, but it's probably not the most effective.
I heard that a lot when we first moved here.
Well, that was part of the joke on television, was that our idea of water conservation was to pray for rain.
Yeah.
So
you brought up secondary meters. Have we ever looked at what that would cost to put secondary meters in?
well, there was a lot of money allocated for secondary metering this year. Not nearly enough. They allocated, I think, $100 million. And they figure it might take as much as $500 million to pay for it.
But the city doesn't do that,
No.
it's all the irrigation companies
Yeah.
that have
Do that.
the
Because
canals.
we
that
don't
feed-
provide any secondary water right now
Very
to
good.
houses.
We provide very little. There is like 27 houses or something.
27 houses, really?
I'm making that number up, but it's roughly that.
We were,
One subdivision, and their secondary system is currently fed by the culinary system.
Sort of
so we
defeats
really
the
don't
purpose.
provide secondary water anywhere
As a city.
as a city.
Yeah,
Right.
a lot of city residents have secondary water through the canal companies, but we as a city don't provide secondary.
And so the metering that was approved was for secondary water to houses. So it doesn't affect ag at this point. And there was a lot of pushback about it, and it's extremely expensive. So people have to, it's one of those things where there are pluses and minuses to every alternative, and we're probably going to have to choose the ones that have slightly more pluses than minuses and just go with
So who's the
it.
ultimate decision maker? This is a state legislature issue, or what is the,
Well, the state legislature will ultimately make the metering kind of decisions for the state. The water conservancy districts do a lot of that for themselves. Weber Basin saved somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% of their secondary water by metering, because people actually knew how much water they were putting on their property. But the water conservancy districts are integral, really important parts to this whole puzzle, because they've been given the authority to manage water in the state of Utah historically. Our water conservancy district is young, and we don't own any water. So we're sitting in a very awkward position in that regard. We want to preserve and protect the water resources that are in Cache Valley. And I heard more than once over a 2-day period, you guys don't have to worry about it, you got lots of water up there. And that's sort of yeah, but we should be doing exactly what everyone else is doing to make sure that we have a lot of water for a long period of time, instead of having someone else say, ooh, they got a lot of water, let's siphon off a little bit with our big straw. So, anyway, on that happy note, I'll turn the time over to you, Amy. Talk about Fourth North.
so I asked Jeannie to put this on, last week was the Utah League of Cities and Towns conference or annual meeting, what's it called?
It's the fall
Annual-
meeting.
Annual fall conference. And, a lot of it was focused on, plan, and then very little was
Densify.
focused on make the plans actually happen. So when I was sitting there, I was thinking, we have a plan that's been there for 7 years that we're not working on making any action on it. And it's the Fourth North Corridor Plan. And we brought this up a couple of years ago, and then kind of COVID came and kind of overshadowed everything. But I just wanted to read what the introduction to the Fourth North Corridor Plan is, as to why are we looking at a Fourth North Corridor Plan. The form of Fourth North has become overshadowed by its function. The Fourth North Corridor Plan provides a concept to create a meaningful streetscape design for the corridor that seeks to shift the emphasis to a more multimodal approach. It lays out a design-oriented framework for future redevelopment and offers the opportunity to break down physical barriers bisecting the north and south portions of the Adams neighborhood. Redevelopment areas offer the opportunity for a transition in land use to a more pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use, multimodal cultural hub that serves the neighborhood, broader community, and the campus. The corridor can reflect the character and culture of the city, neighborhood, and campus for those traveling its length. While the streetscape design and redevelopment approach alone will not automatically lead towards change, this plan provides the framework and is a first major step towards making it happen. So we have that first major step, but we've done nothing more to make it happen.
We did the lights.
We did the lights. And I think what was really interesting is one of the sessions I went to was on complete streets, and it kind of talked about when you make streets wider and nicer so that they're safer, it actually leads to increased speeds, which is kind of, you know, something too, I think on 4th North that, you know, I have concerns about the speed, and that when they do studies, and this is exemplified by what happened in Sardine, the safer Sardine got, now the speed limit is higher on 89. It went from, you know, up to
55 to 65.
to 65, because now all of a sudden it's more of a complete street, so it's faster. So the 4th North Corridor Plan kind of modifies how 4th North runs. And anyway, I just thought as a council and as a city, we should decide, like, we make these plans, is the
We
intention,
pay for these
we pay
plans.
for them, is the intention, should we be readdressing, having an action plan to reevaluate it and to begin to implement it?
Well, good, because Mike and Russ asked me yesterday what we were going to talk about with 4th North, and I was a little bit off because we talked about the medians in particular that were specified for part of 4th North and actually approved by UDOT. But it's, you know, we need to have, if we have an action plan, we have to have a money plan
Yeah.
to get it done.
And is this a priority versus some of the other
Right,
expenses
council
that we
allocates
need?
the money, and
Right.
again, I mean, we have lots of
Infrastructure
projects to do, so that would be, again,
But I agree with you personally. don't know
I
about
pulled my
everybody else.
4th North plan out last month. I think we need to do something there. So it's been on my mind for months.
all right, we'll take internally with staff, we'll have some discussions, see if UDOT still will approve those plans and get some updated budget numbers, which every budget number we get these days is rather frightening. But
Yeah.
Well, the one thing too, I think was, you know, brought it to mind to me, even, you know, before Amy and I talked about it, was that 12th East, the redo of 12th East that the university is involved in.
Right, and
And
that we got some grant funding to do that, to
And
make
the
that happen.
4th North Corridor Plan specified how that could look. They did all that in the plan. And it was pretty cool because it was an entrance to Utah State. It, you know, it had a presence to it. And I don't know whether they're going to implement any of that, and if it's a perfect opportunity to get a piece of that done.
Yeah, again, if the university wanted to.
Well, the
invest in that,
university
and
was part of that.
And I guess the other thing we need from council is, if this is a higher priority, you know, what then moves down the list, you know,
Yeah.
so.
So just about it's a discussion time now
Yeah.
as we move into budgeting, which
Yeah,
always
in
seems to happen
January.
super fast.
I know, you know, once we
Sorry,
get to
Rich.
January, February, we start doing that.
But, you know, but for us too, to have an understanding of if this becomes a priority, yes, then what drops off? And if we're looking at water and we're reducing the ability to eliminate leaks, then that's gonna then
Debate.
result in less water conservation. I just feel like it needs to have more of a public discussion as to what are our priorities and why. And this, again, it's a plan that's on a shelf, and either do we shelve it or do we actually do something with it?
It'd be nice to see someone come forward with a plan to do something on 4th North, and we could start a new RDA.
And again, I mean, that was kind of what we were waiting for, was a development project that really sort of kicked that off. And, you know, the In-N-Out Burger on the corner wasn't really quite what we had.
But that leads
Which
right.
leads into my next point.
I was going to say before we move on, you know, when David Zook came and talked about the housing crisis and the task force that they put together, they talked about more student housing. Well, that's where we should have more student housing, and if we can partner with the state legislature and the university and maybe get some money to help with that. I mean, we need housing for students, and that's going to free up more housing for small single families as well too. If we take care of that bottom level of housing need, I think that will really help with other issues that we have as well
But
too.
in that plan, didn't we zone that single family? Because above, so east of 6th East is the higher density campus residential, where we were trying to which made sense for the students because it was close and walkable. But I'm pretty sure the Adams neighborhood input on that corridor was, we need that to stay single-family residential, or that changes the character. I mean, there are certainly some existing.
It's really not single family.
It's not single family, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't think there's, how many single families live on 4th North
Right.
I
anymore?
doubt if there's any.
It's all rentals.
I agree with you, Mark, that
Yeah.
it really is a linkage for student housing
Well,
down to the.
We're dealing with so much, growth north-south. We need some commercial growth east-west, and that's like the logical place for that to happen. And we get some of that mixed use that Amy was talking about in there. We get some more residential. We put some student housing in there. Then our students who are driving one car for every student, all of a sudden they can park the car, leave it there. They can work there. They can eat there. They can entertain themselves there. They can go to school there and just leave their car in one spot and just go. So it's a spot where I think we could really do some great things and alleviate some housing issues. We could alleviate some traffic issues. We could do a lot of really great things.
And we can
there.
pull out the Adams neighborhood plan as well and sort of refresh.
Well, and I think
But there are
that,
some recommendations for different zoning now in
Yeah.
the 4th North Corridor plan as well, so it's.
but I think even if we focused on the streetscape, the street improvements,
Yeah.
it would be a really good start to something bigger.
Look how many people are using Center Street now because of how beautiful it is. We do the same thing on 4th North. Everybody walks and rides their bike and rides their scooters and helps with traffic.
I think this is good that this was raised. I'd like to read it. It's been a while since we've had it, and like to read it. I have new ideas on it for myself. Maybe we put it on a future workshop.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that, so. again,
Absolutely.
It's available on the
wanna
city
do it,
website if you need to.
If we have a light agenda,
Like tonight.
December? Yeah, I took away that lightness, didn't I?
Way to go.
I don't know what December looks like at this point.
I think Mike has some of the items.
We'll have the moderate income housing plan that we need to.
We need to meet the state.
That's going to happen in
Okay.
December? That'll be a long one.
And if it's not this budget year, it might be next
Yeah.
budget year, but I just feel like it's languished and either, like you said,
Get
we
some-
created a plan, we paid for
Right.
it. There was a lot of input in reading through it, community involvement.
I thought it was one of the better plans we've ever created, actually.
I can't remember the cost, but I think it far exceeded by 10, 20 times what our annual contribution to new infrastructure capital. So I don't think
No,
it's
I
a
know.
one-year
yeah.
pressing issue. It's more of a long-term plan that we work toward.
Well, it would be
Do
nice
by
to figure out an
half
incremental way to
modules.
do it, so that like 1 year you do the medians, and 1 year you do the sidewalks, and 1 year you
Or
do
one
the
block
trees.
of it.
Yeah,
Or
or
one block.
A lot of it, yeah.
Well, it's mostly 2 to 6 is where, I'd like to focus on 2 to 6.
Just remember that Center Street was only a short amount in total when you count because once you start talking about the surface, then you talk about the subsurface, we're talking 1.8 million. So it gets pricey.
Yeah, it does.
It's really expensive.
Well, as they say,
And again, we have-
plans, God laughs. So.
Well, and it's a UDOT road, so obviously there's that interaction
Right.
and coordination that has to take place as well, so.
Right. But it's valuable to bring it up. And now TC1.
So your comment about in and out, and, just in following the planned development on the opposite side of that street, and, I think for those of us that were on council when we passed the TC1, that's not really, I think, what I was envisioning town center buildings would look like in and out, or the proposed coffee shop. But as I was looking at the town center plan, or town center guidelines, we have a height minimum of 12 feet, which allows for that, just those kind of single commercial entities. And I don't know if that really fits the vision of what we thought town center should be. So I love giving Mike work, but do we maybe want to have a conversation about looking at that height minimum? You know, when we were passing this, all the conversation was about the height maximum, right? That's what everyone was really worried about. And the fact that we can have single-story buildings in that doesn't really fit that urban concept of trying to build and extend downtown further north and further south in the Town Center 1 and the Town Center 2 zone. So again, just, you know, you go to meetings and people start talking and you start getting ideas and
How many places have you
Rich
gone?
starts giving you glaring looks.
How many places,
bring them home.
You bring them
how many
home,
places
but-
have you gone where you've seen a brand new grocery store with 3 or 4 levels of housing above it?
And again, with density,
You know,
the whole
and-
point
and-
was to do that.
Right, and here we're looking at, you know, empty Macy's building over there, and it's like, you know, what if we brought another grocer in? Do we want just a single level, or do we want something, you know, that's gonna provide some housing that we desperately need as well too? So, you know, it's good thought, I like it.
So again, not a hurry, but it just feels like as things are starting to happen and change on Main Street.
And they're going to change, it's a 40-year change. It's not like they're going to change again in a year and a half.
Right, but we have had 2 locations that now are in that Town Center 1 zone that are following the parameters that we set 4 years ago. And I'm personally not thrilled that In-N-Out Burger is considered Town Center. Just saying. Personal concept, personal thought.
Yeah.
Anyway, and if there had been a higher height, you could still put it, but there would have, like you said, it would have been more like a Morty's with something above it.
Yeah.
Whether it's offices or
Yeah.
whatever. Again, I don't know if developers would like that, if that would change how things go, but personally, I don't know that I care.
Change the
I think we
look of
want
their
to make the city
building.
the way we
for
think it's
sure.
going to work, yeah. So, at some point in time, I think it's something we should
Still
consider.
function.
So would you, like, what, you want them to discuss it? Do you want them to bring back recommendations?
Do you have time for that, Mike?
Mike will say no.
Do you want to maybe shoot for January in that, let them get the moderate
Yeah.
income housing
Or
plan
even in the
completed?
spring, I mean, I don't know, it's just,
It's important but not urgent.
Yeah.
right. But as more projects potentially come,
Right.
Right, and I think we ought to talk about, we can't have that everywhere or else we would stifle all development.
right,
Well, what we end
But
up
within
with,
the town center, you can do it.
right.
but what we end up with if we let it happen in town center is we end up doing exactly what the state tells us not to do when they told us to densify.
Yeah.
Because you either sprawl, which is basically what happens if you do a city that's all one-story buildings. You have a sprawl concept, or you tighten it up and densify it.
You know, and we've got the city property on 3rd North that's going to have to go in at some point in
Third
time.
south.
3rd North,
Yeah, just across the
that's
street.
across from
Yeah.
the library.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, and I know there's discussions about that, but right now,
that's town center.
that could become a one-story
Yeah.
building across from the library
Oh, yeah.
based on what our current town center zone is.
Right.
So it just feels like.
We're talking about it as a design issue, which I appreciate, but it eventually is an economic issue. So the person that buys the land, he wants to do the maximum. So, you know, it's interrelated to the interests of whoever's going to develop, making it work. You'd think that higher density would make it more. I don't know why they didn't do more, except they wanted to have full control. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's,
but you're also, you know, you deal with land leases too, so people just lease the land and then they put something on it that isn't necessarily, it just depends.
I like the conversation.
You want me to go to more meetings so I can bring more
Yes,
things
go.
back?
We're supposed to go to all the meetings.
as
I don't know that work would like it if I went to all those meetings, but.
As
I know
we
my boss
mature
does.
and have more housing in the downtown area, there'll be greater incentive to put higher density commercial in there as well, I think,
Again, you build a building and it's there for 40 years.
next year.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna live long enough to see that.
I think it's a little to 110.
It is a possibility.
You're the youngest here, so.
So Ernesto doesn't know, he's over there going, oh man, you guys bring up all this stuff all the time.
I make it to see it.
You may get to, oh, there he goes. I may get to see it.
He is the youngest.
Rude Ernesto.
Whoa. Any more conversation on this random bit of items that we brought forward?
I'm good.
Okay, we'll move now to our action item. Rich, would you like to go through it one more time for us?
A few items to consider for appropriation. A request to appropriate $64,167 that the Community Development Department received as a grant to address homelessness. A request to appropriate $300,000 restricted reserves in our 911 fund for replacement radios. A request to appropriate $5,460 from police overtime shifts, and lastly, a request to appropriate $11,400 for a bulletproof vest grant for our police department.
We have a sample of that tonight.
There you go.
Very nice. Thank you.
Stand up.
You're modeling for us tonight. Thank you.
Any questions?
I may have asked this, but I'm getting old, so I may have forgotten it. Reducing homelessness, this $64,000.
Mike left.
How
He
did
left. Yes,
Yep,
he
he
zipped out.
he saw this coming?
I do. So,
What are we doing with that money?
so it used to be that a portion of our sales tax was automatically remitted to the state to help with homeless shelters statewide, particularly the law enforcement category. They adjusted that legislation somewhat to allow funds to go to some local jurisdictions for helping the homeless issue. Now, CAPSA ended up qualifying as a homeless shelter because many of their domestic violence victims are considered unsheltered. So part of that money was to go to CAPSA for a caseworker to help with those people, and the other half was to go to BRAG to do outreach with people who are experiencing homelessness or on the verge of homelessness. So those two, and then, but it had to go to a public entity. So the city, it's kind of like we do with our CDBG funds. The city receives it, we're essentially re-granting to those two organizations. We have to report back to the state, CAPS and BRAG will provide reports to us. So that money is going directly to CAPS and BRAG for homeless efforts, but so that-
Do we do any help to the warming shelter?
Pardon me?
Is there any help going to the warming
Center.
center?
It is not a shelter, it is a center.
Yeah,
It's not homeless housing.
It's a brand
It's
new
warming.
501c3.
Okay.
So it's just in its infancy, so just got approved on Thursday, so no, there's no city funds.
I just was wondering if we're financially helping.
No.
Okay.
And this money is coming from the state, so it's just passed through us.
Anything else, Tom?
No, thank you.
Okay. This is a public hearing. If there are any members of the public who wish to speak to this item, please come to the microphone, state your name, and please take 3 or less minutes.
So
Nice
I'm
to see you,
Bronwyn O'Hara. Yes, thank you. I live in Logan, and I was looking at the attachment about the grant for the reducing homelessness, where it says the expense would be special departmental supplies, even though the mayor had mentioned this money's going to CAPSA and BRAG. Just calling it supplies, is that diapers, or is that linen, or is that?
It's a general, we have a general ledger, and that is simply the description on the account that it goes through. Supplies is the account number, and the reason is because it's non-capital. And we could create a new account and have a more appropriate name, but the problem is it's a general ledger, not a specific ledger. So it's just the general ledger account from which we will spend those funds.
Okay, and the mayor mentioned a caseworker. Is that part of where the money's going to pay for a caseworker for CAPSA?
No, yes, CAPSA is doing a caseworker and BRAG is doing someone to do outreach, is how they have defined how they will be spending their money and have to be reporting that.
Okay, so is it exactly cut in half? Give half to each entity?
think so. I'm not exactly sure. I'm happy to follow up and send you an email on that, but I think it's split half and half.
It's specified in the grant that we applied for in behalf of these organizations. That's where it would be specified in. The grant application would state what we're using it for, and it's approved by the state.
Okay. And this is actually state funds, not federal COVID coming through the state.
So as the mayor stated, each city who does not have a homeless shelter as defined by the state of Utah contributes this money to a fund held by the state. The state then distributes it back out. And a few of the things it can be used for is the purposes we're using it for here, and primarily used to reimburse those cities, including Logan, for their public safety impact because they have those shelters there. We haven't applied for that yet, but it could be something we'd apply for Logan City to enhance public safety related to homelessness.
Okay, and then a last question. So is a city that has a certain population able to apply for these grants? So it's not like Benson could apply because you're kind of tiny, but
It's
a
not
larger
based on
city.
population, it's based on do you have sort of, CAPSA qualifies as a homeless shelter. Again, Bragg's was a little bit different where they were slightly, but they met the state criteria. Again, the state granted the grant, and I can send you a copy of the application if you'd like to read the specifics.
But the only cities that can get the money back are the ones that have contributed it in?
No, the cities that can get it back are the cities that have a qualifying shelter within their boundaries.
Okay.
So
So
if the
Logan
time-
now qualifies, Salt Lake City, Ogden, St.
Okay.
George.
If one of the smaller cities chose to create a shelter, they could be eligible to apply as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and the fact that CAPSA only serves the population that's homeless due to domestic violence, is that why Bragg is also included to help with the
Rather
other
than that,
homeless categories? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council.
I would move passage of Resolution 2242.
Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have one workshop item. Rich, you're on again.
A single item to consider, it's a request to appropriate $1,275 for police federal cases. So we get reimbursed when our police department works on certain types of cases. In this case, they're federal cases, so we're getting reimbursed $1,275.
Any questions?
That's it.
I know it's not very much. We typically try to wait until we accumulate a few more of these.
Are there any other considerations this evening?
Yes, we had library board meeting last night, and there's some great fundraising opportunities coming up for the library with a fundraiser going through Cafe Rio and also one with Krispy Kreme. I do not have details at my fingertips for those, but I can get them to you.
If you order Krispy Kreme donuts for $15 a dozen.
Online.
Online.
Yeah,
And pick them up, they will give 50% of that money to the
to the
Logan
library. Yeah, and do you know how long that goes for? I couldn't
remember
I
how
didn't
long
look
it
at,
was.
I didn't read it close enough. And then Cafe Rio, I think, is on the 27th
Yeah.
of this month
for one day.
for one day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't
So,
tell my wife.
great. But there's going to be other fundraising opportunities and opportunities for people to participate and to donate to the library. So I thought I'd just bring that up.
Great.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yes.
Oh, jeez.
You've already spent all your time tonight, Amy. You
I
allocated
just
time.
wanted to say
It
that
was like, I expected you to say it first, and then he piped up, and then you piped up.
that this year on Center Street, we were talking about Center Street, there's going to be a couple of different events. So on Saturday, the 29th is the Logan Parks and Rec is putting on an event, and there'll be the wonderful and amazing witches dancing.
Are you dancing?
I'm not sure yet.
Which is very family friendly.
It's very family friendly. I haven't missed years, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be a witch this year. I've had enough of a reputation. I don't need to. But then also Downtown Alliance, which I said on that, they're still doing, and I want to make sure people understand that, they're still doing their trick or treat on Halloween.
On Halloween.
So it's Monday from noon till 4? Is that correct? Anyway, if you want to go to the
I thought it was from 10 until 4.
so Mark will be handing out candy
10
at
in the morning until
Anderson's.
4, yeah.
Yeah, those two events.
But isn't
so
that a school day?
It is.
it is, but there's lots of little kids
There's
that,
like thousands, Jeannie. We're talking thousands of kids come.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy. What if we were to explore an ordinance to make sure that we only did trick or treating on the Saturday before Halloween?
I am not touching that with a 20-foot pole. But anyway, so if you're looking for things on Halloween, Saturday on Center Street, and then Downtown Alliance, all of the stores that are down there, they'll have trick or treat available. So
Check the Parks and Rec website for details on the Saturday Center Street event.
So get your jack-o'-lantern on.
You don't like that idea?
Anything else?
No, we're good.
Yes, no.
Oh, I've thought of some things. I have a little book here that I'd like to read.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
All right, thank you.
That was just too much frivolity.